Why is deception so normal and decency is too formal? You are such a genuine gem. Thank you for clicking on my video. I'm Brooke Makenna, but today's case is about the disappearance of Eric Haider. And this one is such an infuriating one because there may have been a body eventually found, but there are still zero answers and so many very suspicious people who may have gotten away with it. So if you don't know, I post so much content like this, so if you are interested in learning more about these victims and these cases, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss a video from me, and go ahead and thumbs up this video and share this case if you think it will help, or at least the information that I tell you. Now let's get into the story. So it was Dickinson, North Dakota in 2012, and 30-year-old Eric Haider was a loving father, a loving man, a peacemaker is what he was described as, and he was working as a construction worker at the Koffel Heating and Plumbing in Bismarck, but he was actually working at a site in Dickinson at the actual construction site. But on May 24th of 2012, his mother would go to drop him off at work to install those water mains that he was doing at the construction site, but she would drop him off at Bismarck, and there he would carpool with his friends to the actual site, or I guess his co-workers. I really shouldn't say his friends. So him and his mother exchanged I love yous, goodbyes. He said he'd talk to her later, just normal stuff, but his mother did not realize that that would be the last time that she would talk to her son. When Eric didn't return home that evening, his family began calling his friends, seeing if they could see where he was, and he was nowhere to be found, and nobody had a clue, and that is when they reported him as missing after trying to call his cell phone and he wasn't answering as well. And Eric was the type that was adventurous, always looking for a new adventure. He would go kayaking, cliff jumping, whatever it was, he was outgoing, and that's why he had a lot of friends to call and talk to. Everything he did, he was always wanting to move forward in life, and that is why his parents said he was actually looking for a new job, because he had a new family, he had a fiance, he had a daughter, and he just wanted to give them an even better life, so he was looking for a new job. But the time he disappeared, he was working at a construction site with a group of 6 men, and after he went missing, they of course were interviewed about what had happened that day. And according to coworkers, Eric was asked to seal a leak in the pipe after lunch that day. They all went out to fast food to eat, and then he was asked to seal it afterwards. They checked the phone records, and Eric's phone showed that at 12:04 p.m. he checked his voicemail for the very last time. They also checked the coworkers' phones, and they found that one that was doing the backfilling had actually taken a call at about 12:14, which had lasted 5 minutes. But the odd thing about this was the same person was also saying that at that time they were loading dirt into the hole and could not have been on their phone. The whole crew said they began to backfill it around 12:15, and the next phone call they could find was from the foreman's phone. This foreman had called Eric's phone at around 1:13 after they realized he was gone. Now, this foreman said that before any of this happened, the foreman had called down to Eric to talk to him about sealing the leak. And then it was almost like they completely forgot about him until after they were done and called him at 1:13. However, at the end of the day, after they called him, couldn't get anything, they took his paycheck and his lunchbox and they took it back to Bismarck, where his mother had dropped him off that day, where they, carpooled from the construction site to the actual company. They just headed back to the company and all went home that day without telling anyone that he was missing. And Eric's stepfather was so infuriated by this, saying, "If you see half a dozen men there and there's one guy gone, you stop what you're doing and you find out where that person went." Police asked to see some of the surveillance footage from that day, and the foreman was there right there with them to help him get the footage, to watch over it with them, and they said that the foreman didn't act nervous at all. He in fact was very confident that Eric was not there. He had not been buried. There was nothing of the sorts that was happening. He knew it for sure. He was very confident about it. So they didn't feel that it was any sort of foul play on this foreman's part. 5 days later, still nobody knew where Eric was, and that is when the authorities went to the site and got an excavator operator to help dig up the area where they had been working that day. The company, the Caufel company, told them exactly where they had been digging, and so they dug right there and were going deeper and deeper, and then unfortunately they hit a water line and had to halt all production. Although Eric's friend Rick Lemke had said that there was no use in digging in that spot anyways because it was the wrong spot, and that a witness that he knew who lived in the same area said that they were digging in a completely different spot than where the construction workers were working the day Eric disappeared. But Rick didn't think that there was any foul play involved. He just thought that they were looking in the wrong spot for what was probably a deadly accident. The family of Eric Haider, though, was very adamant that that is not what they believed. They believed that there was foul play, and in fact, they came out with flyers with a map of where they wanted people to search all around Dickinson because people began to say that Eric had just walked off the site to cash a check or to do something and just walked off that day, and they knew that that wasn't true, that he wouldn't have done that. The family also admitted to the public that this company that Eric had worked for, Caufel, had not contacted them whatsoever to let them know he was missing or to send their condolences afterwards. And they were the ones who told them exactly where to dig, and that was thought to be the wrong spot. But Eric wasn't found anyway because they had hit the pipe and couldn't go further. Eric's mother said, "I do believe in my heart he is no longer with us, but I just pray that somebody has the decency to come forward." You see, Eric was 6'1", 150 pounds, brown hair, blue eyes, a full beard, and he was last seen wearing dark work clothes and blue jeans. Eric has multiple tattoos and a pacemaker that does not have a defibrillator and cannot be traced. Missing persons posters stated that he possibly just walked off the work site, and coworkers were saying that he was denied a vacation and was very angry about it, and maybe that's why he got angry and just stormed off. Years later, with the Haider family continuously searching and getting told that there was nothing else that anybody could do, that basically that was it and they just needed to drop it, they finally hired a private investigator from Discovery Investigations, and within a few months they had found Eric. It was May 21st of 2015, and Eric's body was found 6.5 feet under the dirt, 10 feet away from where they originally searched. This time they used cadaver dogs and found him. His body was found crouched by the water line that his crew was working on in an upright position as though he had been working on it when he was buried. The decomposition of his body was so bad that they couldn't identify him at first, so they sent him to the University of North Dakota Forensics Lab to do some testing to see if they could identify him, and through medical records and personal belongings, they did identify him as Eric Haider. Because he had a pacemaker, they could identify the exact time when his heart stopped, and it was said to be 12:19 that day, 5 minutes after the crew said they started the backfilling. But his cause of death was left undetermined because they couldn't really pinpoint whether he was dead before they started or after, because yeah, they had the times, but the coworkers could have been wrong. But the Dickinson police were now opening a criminal investigation against his coworkers, and particularly the two that were doing the backfilling that day and filling in the hole. And one of them was very cooperative, kind of told them everything they needed to know, and said that that day he couldn't really see over this pile of dirt into this ditch to see if anybody was there. He also said that the other coworker kind of would backfill like an ape, very viciously, very quickly, and didn't watch what he was doing that often. And this other coworker was the one who would not talk to them, and in fact immediately got an attorney. And of course, I told you before, there was a backfiller who they looked at his phone records, and he was the one who was on a 5-minute phone call that day when he said he was working. But I can't confirm whether that was the one who talked to the police or the one who refused to. Dickinson police tried to stay very open about all the possibilities and didn't try to blame anyone up front about it, but they did say this case was very odd. But when they sent all this information to the state attorney said that there was not enough circumstantial evidence to say that it was murder or to even further the case. And he closed the case and refused to file any criminal charges. But Eric's mother aches for Eric's daughter, saying she'll never have her dad back to watch her graduate or walk her down the aisle when she wants to marry or hold her children in his lap. I want justice and I'm not going to quit. I'm not going to give up. Eric's wife is getting some money to support the family through workforce compensation, but that's not enough to replace a life. Now, I really felt compelled to tell Eric's story and to put my spin on it because my father actually did work as pretty much doing the same job as Eric did, and so I thought to get his 2 cents about it, get a perspective that is kind of closer to what actually happened, would be very beneficial. And so when I talked to him and told him kind of the whole story like I just told you, something he immediately said was, why was nobody watching Eric? You see, when anybody is down in this ditch, somebody is supposed to either be above watching him in the hole with him, just always there to make sure they're safe, because you don't know what's going to happen in this hole. Something could fall on you, the pipe could burst, the actual hole could collapse in, and you never know, and that can make it very scary to the point where somebody always needs to be watching to make sure that they can get you out in an emergency or to give you the tools that you need. And so my dad was wondering, this foreman said he called down for him once to make sure he was okay or to ask him a question, but where was the foreman after that? Why did he not know when it was time to fill that Eric was still down there, or he wasn't, which he obviously was, but how did he make the call that he wasn't still down there? Did he even look? Did he even try? Was he even there? My father also brought up the fact that there was no shoring or a trench box or something to keep basically the walls of the hole standing to not collapse in. Some of the construction workers use that to keep it up, although we don't really know how wide it is, so it could have been wide enough they didn't feel they needed it, but that is something that could be a precautionary tool to use, which doesn't seem like they did. My dad also had the theory that possibly if they really didn't see him when they began to do the backfilling, if they looked over and they didn't see anybody there where he once was, he wondered if possibly that section of the hole had already caved in on him and nobody noticed because nobody was watching, and then it was just dirt when they started filling in the rest of it and they didn't see him because he was already buried. Things can happen so quickly in a situation like that is why someone always should be watching. There was actually an incident with my father's job where he was watching over this guy who was in a hole who was fixing a pipe leak, and this pipe actually burst, and the guy down there had so much water pressure in his face that he couldn't see, and so my dad obviously had to help pull him up and actually had to take him to the hospital where he now lost almost complete vision in that eye. And imagine how much worse that could have been if my dad wasn't there to help him out of the hole. And that is why it needs to be taken very seriously when they're doing work like that. Something that my dad wants to know now, he used to work for a city doing this job, and this is a construction site and a construction crew, and they do a different type of work, but it's still the same work, if that makes any sense. And so what my dad wanted to know, since he doesn't have any experience in construction, is if they have to have any training. Because he had to take classes like shoring, trench safety, confined spaces, classes like that to make sure that they knew what to do in those situations and exactly how to be as safe as possible. And he just wanted to know if it was the same for construction workers, if they had to take the same classes. Because when I was looking it up, all I found was that really you just needed a high school diploma, and then if you wanted to be a foreman, you had to have experience. So basically, I was finding you don't need classes, but please correct me if I'm wrong down below. We'd love to know. But if that's the case and they don't need training, that is horrific, and that definitely needs to change to make sure this doesn't happen again. Overall, my dad believes this could have been prevented, whether this was an actual murder and somebody, whether it was coworkers or somebody else, had it against him, or if people just weren't watching and this caved in on him and nobody knew, it could have been prevented. But it bothers me so much that this wasn't looked more into, because I mean, one of the coworkers refused to even talk and they just closed the case anyway. I would love to hear if you think that this is a cover-up or not. I mean, Eric was said to be looking for a new job. Were they angry about that enough to want to hurt him or make it so he couldn't leave? The person that he drove with to the actual site, how could they just leave without him, especially without knowing where he went? You just gonna leave a person there? No, you're gonna make sure they're okay before you just leave them. You know, I almost believe believe that it was an accident, but once they realized what they had done, they all kind of came together and decided to cover it up. But I'd love to hear your theories down below, and make sure to thumbs up this video and share Eric's story, whether it's this video or the information, because it is such a tragic one. And I hope that you liked the kind of input that my father had as far as actually being in this environment. But don't ever forget to speak up. Your voice is powerful enough, and I love you to absolute pieces. Okay, bye.